what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law, love unto will.
Ave Satanas.
Hail Satan.
At the time of the murders, nothing went through my mind. But later, when it was all over, after I had stood in front of my, over my mother's body and watched the blood pour out, after I had giggled and stood there and just laughed, I found myself in a jail cell. I was all alone. I had no friends. I had no family. I had nothing. I'd given Satan everything, and I had nothing.
Satan be conjured. Lucifer appear.
I would agree to serve him, that he would, in return, he would give me whatever I asked for, power, wealth, whatever I wanted. And I gave him my soul, I gave him my life, not just in this world, but forever.
They were forced to witness others engage in sexual acts, both children and adults. They were involved in ritualistic abuse and rituals where people were dressed up in robes and costumes and there were black candles, and they were told that Christ is a bad thing, that the devil is all-powerful.
Lucifer, in the name of our most exalted God, Satan Lucifer, I command thee to come forth. Shemham Parash. Shemham Parash. Hail, Satan.
Hail Satan.
It's something we thought only happened back in the Dark Ages. Devil worship. But Satanism and the deliberate practicing of evil is more a part of life today than a lot of us want to admit. Our research and police investigations have revealed alarming evidence. Evidence that shows that Satanism is not just a problem somewhere else. It's happening right here in Australia. From Perth in the west to Warwick, Queensland in the east, and maybe your hometown.
Geelong is Victoria's second largest city and could now be one of the major centres where devil worshippers are gathering if recent reports are accurate. Satanist groups are said to be gathering at remote meeting places in the surrounding countryside, including Lau Lau Falls between
the macabre ritual slaying of the middle-aged council worker has been linked to a lesbian cult group with a bloodlust. It's thought members of the cult had been drinking animal blood, and last Friday night they went looking for a human sacrifice.
The vandals left their trail of destruction in a wide arc around the main entrance of the cemetery, pulling plaques out of the ground, kicking over headstones, and in some cases smashing them.
It was these scenes of mutilation that shocked Warwick locals and sparked an intense police investigation to find the culprits. 41 sheep either killed or maimed in a sadistic manner, and 8 Angora goats similarly attacked. The court heard how Birdo had confided to a plainclothes constable that he believed in Satanism. He allegedly said, "It looked after me for a while, but then it let me down. I even drank the blood of the sheep."
Like AIDS and drugs, Satanism won't go away by simply ignoring it. It may be an unpleasant thing to talk about, but we believe it's time for open discussion. In the studio tonight, church leaders, police, psychologists, youth workers, parents and politicians, and the victims of Satanism, some who played with it and got burnt, and self-proclaimed Satanists, Robert Ledgwidge, head of the Church of the Awakening in Sydney, and by satellite from Los Angeles, Dr. Michael Aquino, High Priest of the Temple of Set. If the devil has a pope, it's Dr. Aquino. Now, a word of warning. Very young children should not be watching tonight's report. So mums and dads, I appeal to you, exercise a bit of common sense. In a moment, our story, The Devil Made Me Do It. Again, that warning. What you'll see tonight could be disturbing, so parents, young children should not be watching. First, the American experience. It could soon be ours.
Jefferson, New Jersey. Nice, friendly folk here who wake up one day to a news bulletin that shatters their peace of mind.
According to officials, after the 14-year-old stabbed his mother to death, he lit a fire in the living room while his father and younger brother were asleep.
Tommy Sullivan, the local paper boy, stabs his mother to death and then cuts his own throat. For years, he'd been obsessed with Satanism.
Well, as I came down the stairs, I saw Mrs. Sullivan lying on the floor. Her head was up in this area and her body sprawled across this way.
Police officer Paul Hart. He's seen many a brutal murder, but this is different.
He had cut her throat, slashed her in the area of the eyes, the nose, the cheeks, the ears. She had 4 stab wounds that actually penetrated the skull into her brain. And then he proceeded to cut his own throat, again, literally from ear to ear, through his windpipe almost all the way back to his spinal column.
Butchering his mother was a pact he'd made with the devil.
First thing we found, which was in his parents' vehicle, was a contract to the devil. And it was addressed to the greatest demons of hell and went on to describe his willingness to, in exchange for magical powers, kill his family. And it reads, towards the end, throughout my new life, I promise to perform any satanic ritual except homosexual acts. I will do these to prove my loyalty to the demons of hell. Exactly 20 years from this day, I promise to commit suicide. At this time, I will go directly to hell to work with you as a demon. I will tempt all teenagers on earth to have sex, have incest, do drugs, and worship you. I believe that evil will once again rise and conquer the love of God. If this pact is to your approval, sign below.
That American policeman, Officer Hart, is in our studio tonight. Paul Hart, do you have any other evidence to suggest that Tommy Sullivan was into devil worship?
These pictures in this book came out of his classroom. He was an 8th grade student in a Catholic grammar school. Tommy had was influenced by the occult. This is a picture of a hooded figure, the upside down cross, the pentagram as we see it on the floor here, the horned beast rising out of the flames, and the individual saying, "Come to me, Satan."
Can you exclude Satanism from this crime?
Certainly not. Certainly not as a symptom of what was going on with Tommy, but not as the causation of this particular crime.
Maybe Tommy was deranged. Maybe he was psychopathic.
Very possibly. Unfortunately, when Tommy died, so did the answers to a lot of our questions.
Black magic, witchcraft, rituals, silly fun, or dangerous meddling with things evil? See what you think.
Shemham Parash.
Shemham Parash.
Hail, Satan.
Hail, Satan.
The devil is Anton LaVey, founder of the Satanic Church in America. He wrote his own Bible, a guide to black masses. How to perform rituals like this, a Bible complete with prayers to the devil.
Look favorably on our sacrifices. Open wide the gates of hell. And come forth. Shemham Parash.
Shemham Parash. Hail, Satan.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law, love unto will.
Ave Satanas.
Hail, Satan.
And here in Australia, another high priest, Robert Ledwidge.
In nomine di nostri Satanus Luciferi excelsi. In the name of Satan, the ruler of the earth, king of the world, we command the forces of darkness to bestow their infernal powers upon us. Open wide the gates of hell and come forth from the abyss.
His house in Sydney is a satanic temple. Here, his congregation prays to Lucifer and asks him for special favours.
We have taken thy name as part of ourselves.
To most of us, a farcical pantomime. But to Robert Ledwidge and his disciples, it's as powerful as any Christian mass. Robert Ledwidge, what were you asking of Satan there?
Whatever we want, whether we want money, a job, the best parts of life, what we want, we are affirming we have a right to have.
Sex?
If we want it. Sex for us is a natural thing. Why not?
Robert, are you proud to be a Satanist?
Yes, I don't have any problem with that label at all.
What do you say to people who would call you an evil man?
I would say they're deluded. They have no idea of what Satanism really represents. They're simply taking a Christian perspective, trying to battle with the opposition.
Over to Dr. Michael Aquino in Los Angeles. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that the Satanic or Setian religion itself is not taking anyone down a dangerous path. It certainly does not advocate dangerous or destructive or wanton behavior.
Would you condemn a true Satanist if he was to commit crime in the name of Satan?
Most certainly. As a matter of fact, that's an integral part of our literature, that any person who is affiliated with the Temple of Set, who is found to be committing a crime in any country against its laws, will immediately be expelled from the Temple of Set and referred to the proper law enforcement authorities. We have very strict guidelines in that area.
Before me, Aeondres. Behind me, Teletarches. On my right hand, Shenamkos. On my left hand, Daimonos. For around us shines the star of the 5, and in the stone the star of the 6 is fixed. Ave Satanas.
Back to the United States, to someone who asked Satan to grant him powers, but in return for those powers, Satan asked for a sacrifice, and 3 teenagers obliged by killing their school friend. Junction, Missouri, a town of about 4,000 souls in the heart of America's Bible Belt, where people believe in God and the devil. But no one around here took much notice of talk of devil worship or that satanic cults might be operating in the area, until a group of students from the local high school shocked the town and the nation. Pete Rowlands and his gang had been messing with Satanism, sacrificing animals and daubing the town with satanic graffiti. But it went too far. Late one night, they sacrificed a schoolmate. They clubbed him to death with baseball bats. But what did they want from Satan?
Power. Just, with power comes money, comes girls, just the feeling of people looking up to you, popularity.
Pete Rowlands is now serving a life sentence. He confessed all on this police videotape.
Yes. Go ahead and show us what you did. Okay. I got over right through here, and I grabbed over the hand, and I pulled him through to right here. So the victim, and he was still moaning a little bit and going, kind of like that. Right this bat here, Pete. Okay, this is the bat that I threw. This is the third bat. Quite a bit of blood and hair on this thing. You can see a lot of hair on the end of it. Who all hit him? Me, myself, Jim Hardy, and Ron Clement.
Pete Rowlands' mother, Penny. She still finds her son's crime difficult to believe.
It was like to kill a human being was one of the main things Satan wanted. Other things were discussed, but that was like step number 1. There were others, but that was step number 1.
Sean Sellers, one of the youngest prisoners on death row in the state of Oklahoma. He murdered 3 times in the name of Satan, his mother, his stepfather, and a local storekeeper.
I woke up one night and I had my father's gun and I did it, and it was like I had nothing planned out or anything.
But how did Satan make Sean Sellers commit murder? Well, according to some Satanists, to be loyal to the devil, you have to break the rules. Those rules that keep us all going. In the Bible, they're called the 10 Commandments. Now, Sean had broken them all, except the one that says, "Thou shalt not kill." Breaking that was his ultimate act of allegiance to Satan.
I was invoking demons and asking them to enter my body, to give me power, to take control of my life, to take control of me. I would say, "Here I am. This is a sanctuary for you. Come into me,
Give me strength."
Right.
Robert Ledwidge, what would you say about those murders?
I say without doubt that there are some loonies that go around killing people. I have no doubt that occurs.
Satanists?
They call themselves Satanists. There's loony Christians, loony Buddhists, loony of any religion. That doesn't mean we hold each one responsible.
Dr. Aquino in Los Angeles, the work of the devil?
People can commit crimes in the name of Christ, or they can commit crimes in the name of the devil. And in any case, the crime is actually committed by a person and not by something that is being used as a scapegoat or as a theological excuse for that crime.
Would you accept that there are good and bad Satanists?
No, I would accept there are real Satanists and Christians who are inside out and upside down. There are Satanists who simply are rebelling against Christianity.
People who give your religion a bad name?
Exactly. They're perverted Christians.
He was still moaning a little bit and going, like kind of like that.
Now, Pete Rowland's the young American kid. He asked Satan for power, for help. He says Satan told him to go out and kill, and he did. He killed his best mate. Now, isn't that the end result of what you worship?
No, because he didn't have enough objectivity to realise that when a voice in your head tells you to do something, you have a problem. In Satanism, we don't believe there was an external devil. If a voice said to any of us to go and do anything, we'd laugh it off and ignore it.
That's the risk, isn't it? That some people who may not be as clever as you may take all this literally and go out and do what Pete Rowlands did.
That's a risk in any religious system. It's a risk that Jesus or Jehovah might pop into somebody's head and say, go and chop up a nun. It could be that Buddha's going to appear in somebody's head and tell them to do something. It's a risk with any form of religious philosophy.
Grant us the indulgences of which we speak. We have taken thy name as part of ourselves. We live as the beasts of the field, rejoicing in the fleshy life. By all the gods of the pit, we command that these things of which we speak shall come to pass. Shemham Parash.
Shemham Parash.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Are there other reasons that Satanism is on the rise? Has the occult found another pathway to young and impressionable minds? Some would say it has. Here in our record stores. They call it heavy metal. Some would say it's the selling of Satanism. Monsters, ghouls and angels of destruction leer out of the album covers. Bands like Megadeth, Dead on Arrival, Slayer and Angels of Destruction. Their songs read like the titles of horror movies. This was the musical diet for two of the boys who killed in the name of the devil. On the day Pete Rowland sacrificed his schoolmate, his mother says he spent hours listening to heavy metal.
He listened to that music all the time. He had headphones, so I didn't hear it that much, but what I heard I sure didn't like, and I'd seen the album covers, and they were all bloody and violent, and
lyrics that tempt an audience to kill and maim for the sake of evil. Officer Hart believes heavy metal encouraged Tommy Sullivan to butcher himself and his mother.
According to my conversations with his father, within literally weeks of his death and his mother's death, Tommy had been listening to music by some heavy metal artists. We were never able to pinpoint the specific group or the song, but it did deal with killing one's family members, mother, father, whatever.
Tommy was singing about killing his mother and father.
Exactly, sure.
When Officer Hart was called to the home where teenager Tommy Sullivan had butchered his mother, he discovered Tommy's heavy metal obsession.
It's a song by a group called Rigor Mortis, and I'll just read the one passage. Who's laughing now, you fool? You had your chance and that's it. Expect no mercy from this maniac. Well, you're f***ing history, bitch. First I'll slice off your leg just above the thighs, then I'll remove your slender arms, my passion running high. Last I will decapitate your pretty little head. A masterpiece of blood and flesh lies twitching on my bed.
Brad Robinson, heavy metal music is coming under heavy attack here. Is it fair?
No, I don't think so. Heavy metal music, on the one hand, is just another form of music. In that way, it's powerful, it's expressive, it's colourful, not unlike comics, and it's fun as well. And it's also rebellious. And on the other hand, heavy metal music is a a pretty good reflection, a pretty accurate reflection of its audience and society, which has always been the case with music, with Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Doors, the Rolling Stones. They've always been criticised for...
This is a bit different to Elvis Presley, isn't it, and the Beatles?
No.
I mean, you just look at those lyrics. Fair go.
What I'm saying, that they've been criticised for being the devil's music. But historically, they were an accurate reflection of the times, the disenchantment of youth. Nowadays, sure, it's more overt and more violent, but society is more overt and more violent. I mean, sure, heavy metal music is powerful, and Satanism is powerful in varying degrees, but so is drugs, so is insecurity, so is lack of communication from parents.
We have two heavy metal musicians here in the audience from Addictive, your group, right? Joe, what do you think of the accusations made against heavy metal? Is it fair?
I think the public looks at heavy metal. When they see things like that on TV, they lump it all into one pot. They think all heavy metal bands are evil. But there are some heavy metal bands that sing about Satan and that. But there's also Christian heavy metal bands. And a majority of bands are in between, and they're neither. And they sing about a lot of other things as well.
But why sing about Satan? Why sing about dismembering limbs, murdering virgins? Why sing about that stuff? Now, is that music?
These bands use that thing to get attention. They use Satanism to get attention. It's a heavy subject. It goes with the music.
For a kid to go out and commit suicide or do something like that, there must be something wrong with him. That before he actually goes and does that, before he plays that song, there must be something wrong with him.
Dr. Michael King, psychologist, what do you say?
What we're really looking for a bit there is a scapegoat. It's really difficult to put an image, a fantasy into a person's mind that isn't partly there already and they're not desperately wanting. You might remember, I guess you're old enough as I am, to remember a really delicate song that the Beatles sang about Maxwell's silver hammer knocking the teacher on the head. I don't remember people running around the 60s and 70s working out how many teachers were killed with silver hammers, but I'll bet actually one or two teachers got bopped on the head, but we didn't blame the Beatles song for that. We're just searching for something, but if a fantasy's there and kids want that sort of fantasy, they'll go for it, and you can't blame the music at all.
Pat Basiti, you've written about music and teenage culture. A comment?
I've been working with kids for quite a while and seen the effects of heavy metal. Now, I agree with the guys, it's not all heavy metal is bad. There are elements of heavy metal that come across and are very positive. But there are elements like stuff like this by a band called Black Shepherd. It says this: kill, rape, fight the hunger I feel is hate. Gonna rape that corpse, drink her blood, take all that she can give, then digging up another corpse. Here's another one, preacher of death. Satan, their blood will flow for you, kill, destroy, till total death, destroy till all is gone. You know, I get so sick and tired of hearing people say that kids are bent that way. I've worked with kids for 12 years, and I don't think kids are bent that way. You get normal kids, teach them abnormal behaviour, and you're going to get abnormal results.
I think heavy metal is a minor issue in this. If you banned heavy metal, these incidents would still happen.
Now, so far, there have been no recorded cases in Australia like those American teenagers. But do we have to wait until something happens before we get concerned? Or has it been happening here already? What's that?
Oh, that's an upside-down cross. It's giving directions, because that all come down from this way, and it's a symbol that they use for Antichrist, which is the inverted cross.
Well, that's a satanic symbol?
Yes.
So that's pointing the way, is it, like a direction finder?
Yeah, towards which way they should go to find the ritual site.
So it'll be somewhere down there?
I'd say so, yeah.
The way Jason Goodhue tells it, devil worship happened often at his high school in Sydney.
They make you drink something out of a cup, which is actual blood, either human blood or animal blood, and it's drugged with something which either it's like ecstasy tablet, a trip or something like that. Not necessarily a trip, but something that will relax you and open your mind up.
For Jason, an irresistible choice. Drugs, adventure, sex. The Satanist offered him just what he craved.
Have sex with other people, have sex with animals, have sex with demons. The most vile acts that you could possibly think of sexually, and just the most bizarre acts, sexual acts. Well, you'd go somewhere where it was really distant away from the city, in the country preferably, and somewhere where they wouldn't be found, and you'd have a ritual. You'd sacrifice an animal and you'd offer it to Satan in return for him to do things for you. And the ultimate sacrifice is crucifixion of a human being, where the heart is ripped out and they eat the heart.
Did you ever see a human being sacrificed?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes. There's no way I'm going to tell you.
Are you really saying, yes, you did see it, but you're too frightened to tell me?
I do not wish to answer it.
Adelaide and another student of Satan. Katie was lured into evil at university, a highly organised coven on campus.
There was a lady in the coven who had actually, one of the high priestesses, who had actually chosen to, or been instructed to, get pregnant with the idea of offering the child as a sacrifice. And we had a doctor who was on the payroll. He wasn't actually a member of the coven, but he was sympathetic to the cause, if you like, who actually agreed to deliver the child and then hand it over to the high priest.
Did that happen?
That actually happened, yes. The delivery occurred in the doctor's private rooms, not in a hospital, because the birth would then have had to have been registered.
And what eventually happened to the child?
The child eventually was sacrificed at one of the rituals, in fact, about a week later.
How was the baby sacrificed?
To a knife through the heart.
Does this still go on, do you think?
Yes, yep. In fact, I know of at least 3 witches' covens, even in my area where I live, who meet regularly in various areas and indulge still in the same blood rites and sacrifices.
Katie, how well organised was this coven?
Exceptionally well organised. The meeting places were always well defined in advance. Everybody knew where everybody was going to be. You always knew if somebody was missing, like there was always a roll call, there was regular newsletters, there was always somebody in charge of social functions. It was very extremely well organised. I would say along the lines of, you know, a good church organisation.
Katie and Jason are here tonight. Jason, you escaped from Satanism by turning to Christianity. But why get involved with it in the first place?
For sex, for sexual reasons, for drugs, and because it was all fabricated to say that I had nothing in myself and that only Satan could give the things to me. Basically what he believes in, okay, but more so that I could get gratification from Satan and that Satan could supply all the needs that I have.
Did he?
To a certain degree, yes. And then after that, it all sort of fell apart.
Robert Ledwidge, do you believe the stories of Jason and Katie?
No. People get caught up in Christianity. Christianity has an effect like most cults. in the fact that it encourages its members to exaggerate the sins they've committed before they came to Christ. And I think they get carried away. They get carried away with a fanciful belief in human sacrifice because of the image that's what the devil does. They brainwash themselves in their religion and become convinced that these things have happened. I'm not saying that they can't happen. Some deluded loonies may go around killing people. But there seems to be a whole nightmare-like account coming out all around the world that seems exactly the same from each person.
You're saying that Jason and Katie simply make these stories up?
I'm saying they deluded themselves.
What about Tommy Sullivan, Sean Sellers, Pete Rowlands, also made up?
Well, look at the first two cases. They're teenagers who are violent, aggressive, having problems with their families. They have chosen the Christian image of Satan as a symbol of rebellion. That's got nothing to do with organised Satanism. That's just got to do with the fact that they're rebelling against their parents.
Dr. Aquino, can you sit there and say that Satanism had nothing to do with those crimes?
In the case of the United States crimes, none of those children or young persons were brought up as members of any satanic church or satanic temple. They were in fact all brought up as members of Christian churches and socialized in Christian families, and the idea of the devil that they had was a purely Christian one. To that extent, Christianity failed them and made Christianity's own devil a kind of an attractive thing for them to project their rage on.
Some people don't have the guts to control their own lives, so they blame God, they blame the devil. They become Christians and say Jesus guides them or Satan guides them. It's all gutlessness. People just don't have the guts to run their own lives. Very simple.
But don't you follow Satan?
If you were saying, do I follow a personal devil? Of course not. Just like your Jesus Christ, he doesn't exist. There is no personal devil. There is no personal God.
If there was no such thing as Jesus Christ, why then is the Bible written?
It's a Jewish history book, full of garbage, full of claptrap, which has deluded mankind for 2,000 years.
Okay, then why, in your Satanic Bible, does it speak about instructions on how to give human sacrifice?
If you read that very clearly, the section on human sacrifice in the Satanic Bible discusses symbolically using a way to kill someone via a curse. It does not discuss using blood sacrifice. It discusses removing your enemy via ritual methods. Hate is a positive emotion, love is a positive emotion.
Robert Ledgwich, aren't you taking a major risk there that you say your Bible talks about symbolically removing your enemies? What if someone takes that literally?
That's their fault. It's very clear in that passage. It's very clear in the Satanic Bible.
You take no responsibility for it?
I didn't write the bloody book, no.
Greg Tillett, history lecturer and author of books on the occult. Greg, what do you make of the stories of Jason Goodhue and Katie?
I suppose one option is those things happened. The other option is they're lying. But I think we need to identify a third option. The third option is they're not lying, those things didn't happen, but something happened that made them believe it. I think the problem is that murderers who don't kill themselves are very much inclined to offer explanations for their crimes that say, it wasn't me. It was either my parents, or it was the devil, or it was someone else.
The devil made me do it.
Exactly. You don't very often have someone say, OK, I killed him, it was entirely my fault, I'm guilty.
You don't believe them?
No. Well, let me say, I don't necessarily disbelieve that they took part in rituals in which things may have happened. I find it rather curious that someone who appears not to have gone to the police to admit to having been an accessory to the murder of a baby is happy to do so on national television.
I'd like to say something about coming on TV and saying these things. I am currently under investigation by the Major Crime Squad in South Australia, so I don't have any qualms about coming on TV.
Paul Wilson, criminologist, do you think it's good enough to say that the devil made them do it?
I think it's too simplistic to excuse it away in those terms, yes. I mean, I think there are people with particular personality predispositions who might be attracted to a perverted form of Satanism. But I also know horrible crimes committed by Christians who've become obsessed by God and commit the most terrible murders. And I can tell you crimes in Australia of that sort.
Professor Brent Waters, head of child psychiatry at the Prince of Wales Hospital. Do we have anything really to fear from satanic organisations, from devil worship?
I suspect in the instance of the boy in the United States that they provided a structure for a psychotic boy, a boy probably with schizophrenia. it also provides a structure for people who are fundamentally evil and want to have a power over other people, and it provides a structure for those people who want to be under the influence of people like that.
But do we ignore their stories, or do we take them seriously?
I think we should take them seriously. It's called Satanism now, but elements of our society have been led into evil by charismatic leaders from time immemorial. And I think it's still happening now. I'm sure it's happening in Australia, simply because I don't think that Australians are any different to any other group of humans.
Last year on the 60 Minutes program, I told the story of a young English girl, Teresa. I said then that it was the most painful story I'd reported in 28 years. Here's part of what she told me.
Usually one of us would have to go on the Star, and then we'd be raped by everyone who was there.
Did this happen to you?
Yeah, a few times.
How many men would have sex with you at any one time?
It was usually 10 to 20.
What happened to Teresa is still one of the most controversial cases in British legal history. Mother and daughter are together now, but for 12 years Bridget had no idea what was happening to her child.
I thought she was just hurt by the breakup of the marriage of myself and her father. I explained it away with things like that, you know, that this was because she'd come from a broken home.
You see, Teresa's parents split up when she was just 2 years old and left her in the care of Nan, her grandmother. That's when her trouble started. Nan was part of a satanic cult.
And we used to be taken to a house in the country, or one house in the country, where it would happen there, and we'd have ceremonies there, and we'd kill babies and adults and animals, and we were made to have sex with the animals. We were raped by my uncles and aunts and friends of the family.
Now, when you say we, you and other kids?
My cousins, you know, some girls and boys.
Was Nan there? Was your grandmother there?
Most of the time.
You said that animals were killed there and people were killed there.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
To begin with, it was only animals. You know, I can remember them being brought in and cut down the middle and opened up. It was usually in the Star on the table. We had a big table. When the people were brought in, it was the same sort of thing. It was just, you know, a lot worse.
As the rituals grew more violent, Teresa tried to escape, but the cult weren't about to let her go.
And we ran out of the house, and we were running down the hill.
Were you trying to get away?
Yeah, we were going to run away and go somewhere nice. But they set the dogs out, and we got caught by the dogs. And we were brought back. I thought I was going to die too, but I didn't. I was tied up for a few days.
Teresa, what sort of people were sacrificed at those rituals? Who were they?
One time it was a tramp, or it looked like a tramp.
A tramp?
Yeah. He was brought in, and he was, you know, laughing, and he didn't seem to be there, you know, or was sleepy. And they laid him on the thing, and they cut him from his neck right down, and he screamed a bit, and then he, you know, it just stopped, died out. And he died, and they ate his insides.
The people there ate parts of the tramp.
All of us did.
Was that... Did you understand why they ate him after they killed him?
They said it was for Lucifer. And they said it made him happy.
Was your nan there? Was Grandma there during the sacrifices?
Usually.
What was she doing when this went on?
I was usually looking at what was happening. But if I turned around at her, she would be smiling or laughing or chanting if they were chanting.
Did Nan take part in the ceremonies?
Yeah.
According to Teresa, hundreds of babies were sacrificed by the cult. Not just other people's babies, but her own as well. By the age of 11, she'd already become a mother. How many times did you become pregnant?
7.
7 times. The babies were aborted, were they?
Yeah.
Where were the abortions carried out?
My nan's were at the house.
Who would perform the abortions?
At our house, it was my nan. And at the bigger house, it was the doctors there.
Doctors were part of those ceremonies too, were they?
Yeah.
Would anything else be done with those fetuses?
They were eaten.
I beg your pardon?
They were eaten. We were made to eat them, and everyone would have a piece.
Now, Teresa and Bridget came over from the United Kingdom. They're with us here in the studio tonight. Do you think that abuse that Teresa was subjected to was at the hands of Satanists?
Oh, I'm sure. And what? Satanists were raising her, so her only image of Satan is what they gave her. No Christian lived in that house.
You know, a lot of people have come to me and said they don't believe your story, that you made it up. What do you say to them?
At first they're shocked. Maybe that's why they don't believe it. And when they face facts about something like this, then they have to do something about it. And I think they're frightened to face facts and say, yes, this goes on. And that Satanists do this.
It's too horrible.
Maybe they don't, but Satanists do this.
Robert Ledwidge?
I would say something very disturbing and disgusting took place, but it's certainly got nothing to do with Satanism. What people have done is used rituals or games to justify their own lunacy, their own perversions. That's got nothing to do with genuine magic, genuine occultism, or genuine Satanism. Sick, perverted people do things to people, and that's what happened. Afterwards, professionals and other people have read the label Satanism into it. It's very easy these days for religious people to go back and find Satanism where they look for it.
I'm sorry, there you are very wrong. The child was told to do things to please Lucifer.
Why then did the child just say, just then, that she did not know it was Satanism?
She hadn't heard the term Satanist, but she had heard all about Lucifer and how to please him.
Did rituals take place within a sign like that?
Within and around the sign.
You're not making this up?
No.
What do you say to people who think you are making it up? Maybe not lying, but maybe you're just fantasizing.
Live it. And tell me that I'm lying.
Live it.
Yeah.
Robert Ledwidge, just say she is telling the truth. Does it make you doubt your religion?
No, it makes me have no doubts at all. It simply makes me realise there are criminals out there who would use religious symbology, Hollywood images such as inverted pentagrams, etc., in the wrong way to gain control over people.
What happened to Teresa is not real Satanism.
No, what happened to Teresa is disgusting. And the people who did it should be brought to justice. They're not Satanists, they're not occultists, they're sick individuals.
Danny Guglielmici, the Adelaide pastor. How many young people come to you and say, I'm involved in Satanism?
A lot of them just say they're involved in forms of witchcraft rather than Satanism, although there have been some that say they've been involved in Satanism and have taken us to the spots where they've had the rituals. I can't put a number to it, but hundreds, you know. I remember one story one night where a young man was involved in a ritual and he heard Satan say to him, I want you to lay down your life and come to the other world, and I will get you to meet with all your mates, and then I'll give you your body back. And he wrote down what he was doing as they were having a satanic ritual, and he went off into another room and he committed suicide.
This really disturbs me, that I think we're looking at the problem the wrong way round. We've seen a number of cases where there are kids who are on drugs, have been on drugs, many kids and young people who've been lonely and disenchanted and alienated, who've gone to Satanism or to other things. Instead of looking at Satanism, I wonder if we should be starting to look at ourselves as a community and why, in fact, people are turning to these things.
Maybe you're right, but do you mean by that we just simply ignore Satanism?
No, I'm not saying that at all, but I guess what I am implying is that if Satanism wasn't around, there'd be other things that young people who were disturbed and alienated and lonely would latch on to as well.
Ian, didn't Jason say that sex and drugs were two of the major attractions before Satan was even involved in this experience?
What I found from the occult is that they promoted homosexual activity, they promoted sex with animals, sex with other things, and had the rituals that demons would be manifested and you would have sex with the demons.
Can I ask you how you have sex with a demon?
Well, as Christ came in the Spirit of God and as he came as in the form of human man, that a demon can also come into a physical sense. And also it happens on a spiritual basis as well.
I think that proves the point that I think sex and drugs were the major inspiration for Jason to get involved in the first place. And I think we're talking about a very different Satan to the Satan that you're talking about.
Reverend Lance Shilton, former Anglican Dean of Sydney. Do we take it seriously, Satanism?
We certainly do take it seriously, and I think what we ought to take very seriously is the fact that what we've had from our Satanists here in this program is a great whitewash of the whole situation. Now, just take the case, for instance, we have the high priest here in Sydney dressed like a clergyman, a Christian clergyman, with a collar on. And I would have thought that if he's really honest and wasn't telling lies, that he would have had some of his own symbols on him, so that people would in fact see that.
So it's a war, the way you see it, you against them.
Sure. I think that our adversary is the devil, and I think Christians would say quite definitely, without any soft soap about the matter at all, as a very real adversary, we must be careful that we do not allow ourselves to be hoodwinked by the kind of approach which they make, so reasonable, so nice, so argumentative, when in actual fact it's a deception.
I'd like to cross to Los Angeles. Dr. Aquino, what's your view of what Lance Shilton just said?
I think we've just heard from a gentleman whose perceptions of virtue and vice, and indeed of reality, begin and end with what is taught in the Bible. We are perfectly happy to see Christianity prosper and indeed become as good a social institution as it can be. We would ask nothing less than that we be allowed the same courtesy, because we believe also that we are positive social forces.
The Christians are saying that it's too much of a risk to allow you that courtesy, to allow Satanism to exist, because the dangers are too serious.
I think that there is always a danger that any religion can be misused by people who try to use it as a scapegoat, and I would say that Christianity's own record is a case in point. In theory, it is a very positive and uplifting religion and philosophy. In practice, over the last 2,000 years, for all the good that it has also done a great deal of harm, not only to non-Christians, but to different sects within Christianity. And I think that the gentleman, as I said, who just spoke, should perhaps look to his own house before he tries to criticize others.
Look favorably on our sacrifices. Open wide the gates of hell, and come forth. Shem-ham Parash.
Shem-ham Parash. Hail Satan!
We've heard from the Satanists and their critics, but what about those whose stories are never told? Certainly not in a court. Those too young to be believed in the eyes of the law.
It took 33 months in court for Ray Buckey and his mother Peggy McMartin Buckey to hear a verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find
The very defendants not guilty.
Across the hall, parents and some of the children allegedly molested wept.
The celebrated McMartin case, which ran for a record 2.5 years in California. On trial were kindergarten teachers accused of some of the worst kind of satanic abuse of children.
I can't believe this.
The jury can say whatever they want, but we know they're guilty.
If you had the opportunity to share in the experiences, and they've been terrible experiences, that all of us have in therapy with our children, and you listen to your children describe some of the most bizarre events. I mean, things that you wouldn't see on Friday the 13th, part 20, or whatever the case may be. Things that are just so outrageous, so outlandish, so bizarre, then it starts to hit home. And it's not just one child describing the same event. It's scores of children describing this.
There was sodomy and copulation, the killing of animals as a sacrifice.
In front of the children?
Oh, yes, in front of the children, yes.
Every child not only describes sexual abuse, but what really terrifies them is the ritual that went along with the sexual abuse.
Even most jurors agreed some of the children had been abused.
The case against the teachers was dismissed, with virtually none of the children allowed to give direct evidence in court.
The children were never allowed to say in their own words what happened to them, and to me that was crucial.
Not just the cry of American parents. Listen to what an Australian father tells us happened to his children.
Sticks were put into their vaginas, and they were told that if they'd told their parents, told us, then we would be killed. They had ceremonies where our youngest daughter described big long swords used to cut them, and she has scars under her ankle where she was cut by these sharp swords and bloodlet. She described a bowl with shiny silver patterns on it used to collect the blood from all the kids, and this blood was painted onto a man who was naked, and he performed some ceremony there. The kids were, I would imagine, out of their mind.
What sort of people do you think were in charge of your children?
Satanists, without a doubt. I mean, this is just too bizarre to be a few people playing around with their sexual fantasies with our children. And they were abused physically, sexually, emotionally and spiritually.
Here, tonight, amongst other experts, we have a magistrate from Canberra, Ron Cowell. Ron, why is it that the legal system finds it so difficult to cope with ritualistic abuse of children? What's the hang-up?
I think the hang-up's, like all child sexual abuse problems, is that the law's not yet come to grips with the nature of the witness. Children, up until recently, have never been called upon to give evidence.
Also here tonight, Deidre Grusevan, New South Wales Shadow Minister for Family and Community Services. Deidre, child abuse, as we know it, is bad enough, but is ritualistic abuse of children any worse?
Well, I think so. I think it demonstrates that there could be a network, a network. I believe there is a network of pedophiles, for example, working very effectively in this state and in other states in Australia. And what concerns me is that we could have quite widespread abuse going on because of the established networks, such as Satanists, who could be involved in these practices.
The element of ritualistic abuse, Satanism, muddies the waters legally, doesn't it?
It makes it very difficult because people don't want to believe that it's happening and the system is not able to cope. What we've seen recently is that the mechanisms that are presently there make it very difficult for evidence taken from these young children to not be considered to have been contaminated in the process.
Do you remember anything about the car?
All I remember was that it had 2 stickers on it, and that the registration plate had 2 6s in it.
Closed-circuit television. It means little children don't have to be questioned in the presence of the accused or people in wigs. To any of us, daunting. To a small child, like having to relive the horror.
What did he say? What did he call out?
He just put out Rosie.
But take the case studies of the abused children we've shown tonight. How quickly should their evidence be taped?
if you videotape from very early in the piece, from the very first disclosure, at least you can rebut the suggestion there's been contamination. If there has been, it becomes obvious to everyone.
Okay, Anne Schlebaum, child psychologist. And why do you think the courts have so much difficulty in differentiating between child abuse on the one hand and, on the other, ritualistic abuse?
Once you hear about the masks and the gowns, the killing of the animals, the drinking of the blood, etc., people say this can't be true. So the adult fantasies about child realities, which are called child fantasies, are brought in again.
The kids are making it up.
Yeah.
The children of the American parents who claim that their children were ritualistically abused by a satanic group.
Right.
Are you treating any cases like that?
Yes, I am. And I believe they're very similar, and I believe the children in that case, as well as the case or cases here, have been subjected to similar abuses.
Kim Dwyer, you're also a child psychologist, a professional. Aren't professionals supposed to be sceptical about things like Satanism?
We always, as adults, have the dilemma about whether to believe children. I think we're talking here as though this is something that happens occasionally. It doesn't. It happens often.
We've got to be careful about this area too. I agree that generally speaking, children don't lie. And I don't think they lie any more than adults. But I do think if they're questioned time and time and time again by other adults, by policemen, by social workers, by counsellors, they can't distinguish fact from fantasy. So it's absurd to say that we should just believe children regardless. We have to have what Ron Cowell calls a methodology, a technique, so that we can be sure that children are not subject to adult biases. And I think his technique of having videotapes is a very good technique and should be encouraged.
I think the biggest lesson we've learned is that ritualistic abuse, satanic ritualistic abuse, is happening in our country, it's happening in the world, and that it's something we need to address. Law enforcement needs to address it, the judicial system needs to address it, and most importantly, every parent in this country has to address it. They have to listen to what their children say, and they have to protect their children from it.
Had brown hair and beard.
Now let's return to Sean Sellers, the American kid on death row in Oklahoma. He took his instructions from this book, the Satanic Bible, and went on to kill 3 people.
This is the material that is put out by Satanists, okay? They say that their material is not a problem, that their teachings are not wrong. These are the 9 satanic statements that appear in the first part of the Satanic Bible. And the Satanic Bible in America outsells the Bible 10 to 1 on college campuses. And it says, the first one says, Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. And Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. And it goes on, but here's the one that really caught my attention when I first read them. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, sometimes worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all.
Young, troubled minds looking to Satanism and the occult for the answers. Fred Nile, should we take it seriously?
People treat it as a joke or say it's not true, as some people have been saying here today. It is a reality. Satan is real, and his influence is real, and it should not be played around with, and anyone watching this program should not in any way be encouraged to delve into the occult or try these things out. It is for real.
I think the reality here is religious
dangerous.
bigotry. The reality here is simply religious bigots. What we've listened to are fascist Christians who want to outlaw any sort of opposition. They're not interested in having competition from some other religious philosophy. They want to put their antiquated Judeo-Christian beliefs and force them on society.
Adolf Hitler
is a classic example of a Christian.
And fascist fits the occult, not Christianity. Fascism fits the occult.
Adolf Hitler and you, Fred Nile, have a lot in common. You are both fascists who want to put a belief system on the state. Now, religious freedom is a right. Satanists have religious freedom. We have never said we would want to ban Christianity, yet if you listen to Christians, they have no toleration of any other religion. They want to call us liars because they simply don't want any competition. It's a matter of playing up a scapegoat, scaring people into their congregations by boogeymen in the dark and Satan in the dark. They created the image of Satan during the Inquisition when they murdered millions of innocent people to stop competition. The witch trials haven't ended today. Fred Nile, Lance Shilton are the sort of people who would start a new witch trial and kill innocent people, but via a different method.
Fred Nile, what would you do then with people like Robert Ledwidge if you could make the laws?
Well, that's a good question. I don't believe those rights should be given to Satanists or to the Church of Satan, which the purpose of is to promote evil and evil practices. That's the end result. We see the beguiling face. They can't say what they really want to do because that would turn everyone off.
I think we should see the beguiling nature of Christianity, where you project the love of Jesus on the outside and yet you condemn minorities. You are bigoted, biased and violent. The Church throughout its history has killed and mutilated millions of people. The Pope blessed Mussolini's tanks. The Pope entered into interactions with Adolf Hitler. Throughout the Church's history, it has been a violent, barbaric vehicle. Thousands of young people today can't survive because they can't be what they are because of the guilt and original sin that you project. The image of Jesus is a dead Jew mutilated hanging on a cross.
Absolute lie. No way.
Over here.
To protect our children from what I've seen my child suffer and what will intrude upon my child's life for the rest of life by people like you. And if that means outlawing your religion, then so be it, because my paramount job in my life is raising my children, and my protection of those children is one of the first jobs.
You should protect your children from any criminal activity, whether it is the label of Satanism or Christianity. That's got nothing to do with our religion. Just because a psychopath has misused satanic imagery does not mean you can blame a whole religion.
We're talking about a whole group.
Paul Wilson, criminologist. Now, what sort of people become Satanists?
If you're talking about Satanists, I think we're talking about the perverted form of Satanism where crimes are engaged in. I better make that clear right from the start. And these people, I think, will latch on to something like Satanism and often will distort it and commit crimes in the process. But let me emphasise that these sort of people will often latch on to other things as well, unfortunately including Christianity, and do the same thing. What I'm basically saying, these people are disturbed in any event, regardless of which religious view they're on.
Robert Ledwidge, is he disturbed?
Oh, I don't think so. From hearing him talk at all, it seems to me he's talking in a very rational way. I think the question is, as Brett Waters says, that whether you believe it or not, I have to take people on face value until they show that I'm wrong.
I don't believe that it's necessarily disturbed people who are caught up in this, but rather innocent people. People who can be easily manipulated because they're unaware of what they're entering into. And I don't think we can just opt out by saying it's only disturbed people if they enter into Satanism are going to end up in violent crime of one sort or another. It could happen to anyone.
Pastor John MacDonald.
I've observed a lot tonight in what's happening within our nation around the world. And the thing that disturbs me is there has been a soft sell. Anything that is not bringing glory to God is of Satan in its fullest extent. We can have all religious trappings, but that doesn't make us Christians. And a lot of things have been done in the name of Christ by people throughout history, as has already been indicated to us. But it's not God behind it. It is man and Satan, ultimate control.
Reverend Lance Shilton, a summary, please.
It needs to be exposed for what it is, first of all. And I hope that this program is doing just that. And secondly, we need to make sure that people are not hoodwinked by the lies which come from those who advocate this kind of behaviour. And I believe there ought to be very strict laws against it. And I suggested banning. Now, I know there's a lot of objection to that, but I think we ban other things which are harmful in society without them actually entering into it. We don't wait for people necessarily to take drugs before we'll ban certain drugs in our community.
You say ban them?
I would say so, quite definitely.
You don't agree, Paul Wilson?
We can't go and ban things which we don't like. We end up banning rock music, paintings we don't like, beliefs we don't like. We only ban things which actually harm people or their property. That's the only justification we have of doing these things in a democracy.
If we're going to ban things, then perhaps we should look at the excesses of obsessive Christians and ban the church. Shoot all the ministers, ban the church. If that's what you're going to suggest, banning things that could be harmful, are we going to ban Christianity because of the Inquisition?
Is it a war between Christianity and Satanism?
Yes, of course. I mean, Christianity is, as far as I'm concerned, a neurotic aberration based on the worship of a dead Jew hanging on a cross. We find that sick and abhorrent.
Now, no one wants authorities to tell us who to worship or what we can do in our private lives. Witch hunts or religious persecution, we don't want a bar of that. Religious freedom, it's our right, as long as we don't hurt people, especially the young and vulnerable. What we're saying tonight is, be on your guard. Good night.
You know, these handcuffs are real. My death penalties are real. And I'm only 20 years old now. Kids who are getting involved in this kind of stuff, parents who have kids who are getting involved in this stuff, need to really step back, take a look at what's going on, because these things are dangerous. I would say stop, get away from them, destroy them.
Believe it happens. It's real. And once they face it, you know, that it does happen, then they should do something about it. If they have children, to watch them. And don't let them get drawn into it.
It is a real thing and it's happening now. And all the horror movies in the world can only... They serve to desensitise people, that people think that it only happens in the movies. But I really just hope that people will listen and just understand that that is happening now.
Soy